so they will need to boost their energies and eat something. But there's a lot that there's a lot for us to digest ourselves, Jeremy, that has come out from this morning's speech by President Jacob Zuma. And to do exactly that, I'm joined by the ANC's head of organizing and campaigns, Nomvula Mokonyane. Thank you so much for joining me, ma'am. President Jacob Zuma talking policy, but also talking politics. Let's start with the policy. Did he hit all the right notes for you?
Yes, President Zuma hit all the right buttons. Firstly, the need to accelerate where we have been able to effect our policies. Secondly, to evaluate where implementation has actually been hampered by the capacity of the state. And thirdly, looking at how we deal with issues of financial and any other resource management, which is something that is quite important given our own economic situation. We need to plow back into our local economy so that then what is radical must actually have an impact in the communities where we live and where we deliver, so that local economic development becomes something that is not about job opportunities, but it is about sustainable jobs, creating new industries, new economies, and unblocking the far-flung areas of our country through rural development.
Again, the argument comes back. A lot of these ideas are not necessarily new. The ANC had already come up with some of these ideas. I can take you through a few. I mean, things such as getting the post bank to function as a state bank to distribute grants. I mean, that harks back to 2012 already. Implementation is
that's exactly why
that's what's going to be different this time.
That's exactly what is quite important to say. We need to make sure that we effect those policies that are correct. So the policy conference, amongst others, is to look at, are there policy gaps? Is there a challenge in the implementation? And amongst those other things that we definitely have to look at is, there has been an arrangement that is there on the social grants. Now that the term has come to an end and we're dealing with the capacity of the state to deliver, the post bank has to come not only for social grants, but also as another vehicle to broaden the space in terms of financial institutions, especially that are accessible to the ordinary people. What is going to be new in this particular approach is that we are moving into a lekgotla of the ANC now in July, and as we go in there, amongst other things that we are looking at is to reprioritize what is supposed to be done by the state, but also use our performance monitoring to even agree as to where the resources must go, so that then we no longer fund. We don't only fund departments, but we fund programs that must actually make more impact on the ground. And I think that's where radical becomes much more important, as I have shared with you about what other provinces have started to do, what other communities have actually started to benefit in terms of radical economic transformation, and also township economies.
So President Jacob Zuma says the economy is central to this national policy conference, that the economy, we must get the economy right so that it gets back to growth, etc., etc. Earlier this year, you made a comment that let the rand drop, let the rand fall, and we will pick it up. We'll just pick it up. You've been slammed left, right, and center. In fact, Blade and Zemande says it's voodoo economics. Former Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan also had a lot to say about that. Do you regret that comment?
What you can see now happening, I'll just cite in the area of water infrastructure. Out of a water crisis, we've been able to invest more than 300 million rands through water infrastructure in Richards Bay, where almost the entire Richards Bay mining industry was shutting off. We've been able to create reliability in terms of water, and through that there's been a move even from Kucha in terms of the gas pipeline going into KwaZulu-Natal.
Impressive,
and what is of
what
importance,
has it got to do with the comments that you made?
What has it got to do is that we must actually begin to be self-disciplined. We must be able to plow into our own economy. We need the private sector also to become a reliable partner. It needs South Africans to own up and do the right thing.
But the question about the rand dropping, that's the question that I asked you, that you said at that rally let the rand drop. People, your words were in the context of people saying, the instability at Treasury will lead to the rand falling. And you said they are saying this because a child of the ANC, referring to Malusi Gigaba, has now been appointed to Treasury. Let the rand fall. It's been weak anyway. Let it fall. We'll pick it up. And my question is, do you regret saying that?
I want to indicate, this is what I meant. It will need South Africans to take responsibility and own up. It will need South Africans to not even be too personal, that if it is not a Pravin, then there's a problem with our economy and the rand. Any other deployee of the NC can do it. It started with Trevor. It started with. It came with Pravin Gordhan. We now have Malus, and look where the rand is now. Yes, a lot still needs to be done. But what is quite humbling is the commitment by the private sector, as invited by government, to say let's do things differently. Let's invest on our own infrastructure. Let's unblock economic opportunities like the Umzimvubu in the far-flung areas of the Eastern Cape. Let's actually have our corridors of liberation as what is happening in the urban areas of our own country in Gauteng. What it needs that drastic move that we have seen with KwaZulu-Natal being able to drive their own investments as a provincial government led by the NC towards picking up the economic conditions of the rural areas of KwaZulu-Natal.
I'm going to move on from this comment in a moment, ma'am, but I need you to clarify me, because to clarify it for me, because the part of the criticism says you don't seem to grasp the economy when you say things like that, because in a country that that doesn't export more than it imports, the value of the rand dropping seriously impacts ordinary South Africans that you then expect to vote for you, and that projects you as someone who's not sympathetic to the plight of South Africans.
And that's why now, through our own expanded public works programs, we're creating job opportunities for the poor. We're not only dealing with the issuing of social grants, but we're creating jobs. We've got the 15,000 young people who are taken in for war on leaks. What we must do as South Africans, it is us who must show confidence in our economy so that we can attract including this issue that you are raising. We can't be a nation of consumers. We must also be a nation of producers, so that then we can use our own skills, our own talent to also export to other nations, because we are part of a BRICS where there's a lot of demand. We should be participating there. What has happened with the poultry industry, there's a good potential of cooperatives, of making sure that your households in the far-flung areas of our rural areas also benefit.
So let's tease out the politics that came out from President Jacob Zuma's speech. He tended to want to infuse what he wants to say in the prepared remarks, but he would go off script from time to time. So, for instance, when he was talking about people that criticize the leadership, who are also part of the leadership, and they've become some of the biggest proponents of negative information and news about the ANC, and also what he said about the veterans right at the end there, sort of saying that they want to project themselves as being above the party structures such as the branches. How is this vehicle that is supposed to deliver the progress that you talk about, the ANC, supposed to do that when it's broken, and when people point out that this is where the breakdown is, they get the kind of talk that the president delivered today?
The good thing that has happened is that we're gonna go into a closed session, and the SG will be presenting the diagnostic report. And part of what the president said in his speech was to acknowledge the fact that we have listened to our people, who have heard, but also internally in the ANC, we need to sort ourselves. And that everybody who has an interest in terms of the self-correction of the African National Congress has to be part of those internal processes. You can't want to correct the ANC outside of the structures of the ANC. It has a constitution. It has a very long history, a rich history of actually being embraced by ordinary South Africans and not only members of the ANC. And therefore, our hard and respect by the people of South Africa requires us to also do that self-introspection, and hence we are going to proceed in the coming 2 days, engaging on those issues, frank, because also provinces have done that. What the president was also raising of importance is that this has been an agreement, an accommodation of the fact that let's come and have a dialogue within the structures of the ANC, and this has been rejected. But the good thing, there are also a number of Iztwalandwe that are here, a number of veterans and stalwarts of the movement, and what the president was correcting, correctly so, is that nobody can want to correct a domestic challenge that affects the community without being part of a family.
Let me ask you, as a senior leader of the ANC, what do you think the strategic center of power is in the ANC? And I'm asking for your personal opinion, because there's varied views about this. So Lema Paila, for example, who is of course part of the tripartite alliance, says the strategic power is not at Luthuli House, it's in Saxonwold. And of course you've got people who maintain that it remains at Luthuli House. What do you think it is?
The strategic center of power is the African National Congress, with its headquarters being Luthuli House. Those of us who are active in the organization understand that there's day-to-day life of doing organizational work in Luthuli. Secondly, we also know that there are periodic processes of accounting and touching base with the ANC by the national office bearers every Monday without fail. The National Working Committee, the subcommittees, of course, all of them are not at the same level. They need to be strengthened. And of importance, we also have a process of NEC deployees who are deployed to the different provinces, who then must bring the organizational reports. So I don't know what is Saxonwold. What I know is that the ANC remains the strategic center of power. Luthuli House remains the headquarters of the African National Congress. Frivolous things and cheap politics will not take us anywhere.
So what are South Africans who vote for the ANC in their numbers, at no less than 10 million in the last 11 million in the last national election? What are they to make of situations where revelations come forth, such as the emails that are out that have not been refuted, that suggest that some of your deployees are doing the bidding of people other than the ANC, which carries the mandate of South Africans?
Whatever that information is, and in whatever way that it has been acquired, it must be put through test. And those who are implicated or mentioned must also be given the liberty to explain and express their own views. We've just heard how the DG of Home Affairs actually exposed that there's been a lot of tampering with a letter that came from their own department. All I'm saying, where wrong has happened, there must be recourse, and where individuals are affected, there must also be an opportunity to bring them. Like we have the Integrity Commission, we also have the Public Protector outside of the ANC, we have the structures of the ANC. Those whose names are mentioned, they must be given an opportunity to explain themselves. Fortunately, I'm as yet to be mentioned, but
as yet?
I will never be.
You don't
unless
think
somebody crafts
you'll
it.
ever be mentioned in
unless somebody crafts
of these
it.
emails?
Yeah.
Nothing will come forward.
Unless somebody crafts it. I
Right.
belong to the ANC.
Right. So the question I guess I'm asking you is that we tend to kick to touch, to say let the processes such as the the Integrity Commission, but also the Commission of Inquiry that will eventually at some point be established, deal with these issues. People have been saying there are issues that are coming out of there that don't need to wait for a Commission of Inquiry, where it's become clear that, for instance, the president could ask someone like Faith Mutambi to say, did you leak confidential cabinet documents? Where's that process? Why are you, as ANC cadres, not demanding processes such as those?
Part of what we'll have as an opportunity in this policy conference is to not come with shortcut interventions, but to look at whether the ANC processes are actually responsive. Secondly, whether individual members of the ANC are actually being made to account in a manner that can help to save the image of the African National Congress. And lastly, it's not even just the president. We've got the leader of government business, who is the Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa. Secondly, we've got committees in Parliament, and I'm sure you have heard that Parliament has also started their own processes through their portfolio committees. And the other thing that you have NEC subcommittees where comrades will be able to go in there. What is of importance is, as I'm saying, I don't know how these emails have come through. I don't know the validity of the information, and let it be tested through the correct processes.
Right, ma'am, thank you so much. We could talk the whole day because there just is so much for us to talk about, but we have to leave it here at this point, and I'm going to release you. Thank you so much. That is Nomvula Mokonyane, who is, of course, the head of organizing and campaigns in the ANC. We've, fleshed out quite a number of issues that have to do with what transpired this morning at this conference, but also issues that are happening on the sidelines of the conference and some national matters that have been developing over some time. And for now, it's back to you in the studio, Jeremy.
Okay, Tula,